All of the world began with a yes. That is the opening line of Clarice Lispector's novel, The Hour of the Star. And maybe it's tempting to see in that some kind of sexual metaphor of penetrating the void and the world, being born with this yes. Obviously, people tend to repeat certain words when they are making love, yes being one of those. But everything begins with a yes. Yes, I will become something. Yes, I will do something. Yes, I'm going to be someone. Now, in our world today, the Western world, we are saturated with a kind of no, a kind of naysaying. And maybe to subvert Lispector's opening line, we might say that everything ends with a no, which makes me think that we are, as many people also claim, that we are in some kind of end times, not in a Christian sense, but in a societal sense. In my book, The Path of the Warrior Mystic, I make the following statement. He wants to rid himself of himself because he feels it. His self, his life, his attempts to conform, to be an illusion. He is a contradiction that he has never attempted to resolve, but only to disguise. Now that sounds like a no. He wants to rid himself of himself. But now that sounds like a no. He wants to rid himself of himself. And you might be tempted to think of this sort of new age or spiritual but not religious idea that we must destroy our ego. Years ago, I probably mentioned it before, but I was in the audience listening to an expert on spirituality. And the expert, with some rather slightly angry tone and aggressive look on his face, told us that we should destroy our egos. And when I hear that sort of thing, I always think to myself, fine, but you go first, because it takes an ego to get up on stage, and it takes a really big ego to get up on stage and tell other people to just destroy their ego. Let's just think about how slippery the ego is, of which that expert was very much an embodiment. Let's think about a hypothetical monk and a hypothetical thief for a moment. Our hypothetical monk says, I could never be a thief because I'm a monk. And the thief says, I could never be a monk because I'm a thief. Well, which one is the bigger, has the bigger ego? Well, if that's all we know about them, we can say that it is equal, because both of those statements say nothing more than I couldn't be this other thing because I'm this thing already, or I could never be this other thing because I see myself, my identity is this particular thing. And you might say, well, isn't it better to be a monk than a thief? And of course, I would say, yes, it is, but that is not the question. The question is just who has the bigger ego. And the ego just attaches itself to more and more enlightened things. So, if someone begins as a thief and they say, I'm a thief, I could never be a monk. Maybe they become a monk. Then they say, well, I could never be this other thing because I'm a monk. Or I could never do these ordinary things because I'm enlightened. Or of course, the slipperiest of all is, I'm the person who's trying to destroy his ego. Well, that's just the ego telling you that you are the person trying to destroy your ego. It's still the ego talking, just the ego talking about trying to destroy the ego. Now, so what does it mean that somebody wants to get rid of himself? In my book, well, I'm not talking about the death of the ego, quite the opposite. In context, I'm talking about maybe not developing an ego, but certainly pushing back against this world of naysaying and no, and becoming something instead. What is this sort of naysaying? Well, of course, we only have to turn on the media to see it, or if you go to college, you see it. Of course, we are sort of obliged morally to say what we are not. We are not sexist, we are not homophobic, we are not Islamophobic. No, I'm not saying we want to be those things, we don't. But What we also don't want to be ultimately is somebody who just says no to everything. No, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not those other things. And then somehow by not being that, we have carved out some kind of negative space where we fit. Ultimately, we have to say yes to something. We have to create a world, or we have to create at least our world. So we have to say yes. Now, how do we do that? Now, in relation to my statement, to make sense of it, that I would refer you to the Tao Te Ching, where it says, the sage is not sick because the sage is sick of sickness. So in other words, the person who wants to lose himself, his self is this created illusion where it's all just about not being something. Certainly I remember when I was in my 20s, I was at art college, and I had this distinct feeling, and I remember mentioning it to my personal tutor at the time, that I didn't know what I stood for. I only knew what I stood against, or I didn't know what I really liked, but I knew what I didn't like. And I remember him saying, well, at least that's a star, which it may be, right? If you're studying to be an artist, let's say, and you decide, I don't like Impressionism, but I like Cubism, or at least maybe not, I like Cubism, but okay, I don't like Impressionism, I don't like Dadaism, I don't like Futurism, and then maybe you can kind of find something in between all the things that you don't like as a kind of default option as the only thing that you don't dislike. But ultimately, this just leads us to be kind of going with the flow, very mediocre, sort of taking the middle ground. There's no kind of passion, and to get anywhere in life, maybe this does come back to Lispector as a kind of sexual metaphor, but we need to inject ourselves and to inject life with some passion, to live with some passion. And that means saying yes. So the person who wants to get rid of himself because he's just ultimately forged this identity from negativity, from I'm not this, I'm not that, needs to kind of turn that around or get rid of that and say, I am for this thing. I'm going to become this thing. I'm going to do this thing. That I am that thing, whatever it might be. Now, of course, you might say, well, okay, then I'm going to be a spiritual person, or I'm going to be an artist, or I'm going to be a writer, or whatever it may be. And that seems like you've become something, right? You can say, I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm a spiritual person. But noticeably what happens is this sort of this naysaying becomes a part of it, if not the essence of these things. So people will write about how they're not that, or they will sort of bring in this sort of naysaying into the art. My art is all about how terrible these certain things are. Or spirituality in particular. I noticed that a lot of let's say neo-pagan groups have a kind of kind of Christian politically correct view where it's all about I'm worried about the latest political cause, and we just want to say that we're not that, and it's all very ultimately living in the negative still. Now, I think that's pretty fascinating. We do see a kind of pagan Christianity on the sort of other side of the spectrum, where it's this sort of churches that are about Jesus wants you to be rich, despite what he said in the Bible, or what it says in the Bible. So it's a kind of glorification of wealth and whatnot, which seems completely pagan and not in the slightest bit Christian. But in the world of neo-paganism, nevertheless, there's a kind of Christian virtue, a kind of politically correct virtue, where it's all about we're not that. If you go to our website, we have a little political sign, and it's crossed out so you can see what we're against, and rather than what we're for. And more strangely still, the pagans were most definitely for something, most definitely for kind of glory and strength and honor and this kind of thing, which would be absolutely verboten today. So in the legend of Sigurd the Dragon Slayer, you may notice that after he stabs the dragon Fafnir, who is dying. Fafnir wants to know Sigurd's name, and he's very hesitant to give it to him because The name is who you are. You're connected to your father, to your grandfather, to your lineage. He's a Volsung. So the Fafnir will know who he is, what he stands for. Whereas today, what we stand for is, I'm not, whatever it may be, at the moment, and to sort of tread very carefully around things and to show how we're kind of on board with whatever the latest cause is. But paganism is about glory, about your family name, about honor, and so on. It's about who you are, what you bring to the table, what kind of glory you've already experienced, and what kind of glory you will bring in the future. That's what's important. It is a world of yes, in a sense. And we might say that, coming back to Lispector, that this is the beginning of the West in some way. Of course, people say, Christianity, the Judeo-Christian tradition. Obviously, Christianity has had an enormous impact on the West. No one can sensibly deny that. But of course, so has ancient Greek philosophy, and so has common law, for example, from Great Britain, which goes back to pagan Anglo-Saxons, and of course other things as well. Many of our traditions go back to Northern European paganism. Even the days of our week come from Northern European gods, and of course many of our months come from Roman gods or emperors as well. So there is this at the foundation that created the world that we're in, but now we seem to be, and this is very much a legacy of Christianity, which is also about saying no, right? I'm not a sinner, I'm not prideful, I'm not greedy, I'm not a thief, I haven't coveted someone else's wife, I haven't looked at a woman wrongly or anything like that, or sexually, or whatever it might be. So I'm not these things, and I'm not someone who believes in glory, and I'm not someone who embodies glory, or I'm not someone who is a champion. Because I'm not someone who's strong. This is all bad, and so this is sort of filtered in and sort of provided a foundation for our modern way of thinking, which is really it's virtually entirely Christian, stripped of Christ and stripped more essentially of the Christian church. Which in a certain sense isn't no longer really Christian enough, because it has a hierarchy, and so we've kind of removed that, and now we have a kind of almost like a metaphysical Christianity without Christ, where we can all be Christ, where we can all be sort of come this kind of cosmic victim, the ultimate cosmic no of destroying our ego. And maybe that's your thing, but I would encourage you to get rid of this false self where it's just about I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm this sort of cosmic no, the cosmic victim, and step out and stand for something, who you are, something a little more glorious, a little more wonderful, whether that's being an artist or a writer, whatever it is, or an athlete. You do you, but the point is to really become you, to start your world by saying yes to something. Well, thanks very much. I'm going to talk more about things that I've written in my books, things from other people's books, and we'll probably say some marginally controversial things along the way. So do check back. Bye for now.